Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for joining me. This is the morning market review. It's Monday, it's the 5th of June, 2023. My name is Russell Shaw. I'm a senior market specialist at FXCM, and my email address rshaw@fxcm.com. Just going to go ahead and bring up our disclaimers. We'll start off with the high risk investment warning. Keep this on screen for a few moments. Hi, Howard. Good morning to you. Nice to have you on the webinar. All right, let's just bring up our market commentaries disclaimer. All right, and our references MarketScope 2 and TradingView.com. I'll start off with TradingView.com. Just taking a look at the US 2-year yield at the US dollar. This is FXCM's US dollar, and here's the correlation coefficient between the two, and it's a robust 64%. Let's just put in some peaks and troughs here, and it will help with our analysis. So we want to keep an eye on the 2-year yield just to see the trend direction. And what we can do is we can put in a reference trough over here. Okay, let me just move that there. We could put in our reference peak over here. And the 2-year yield is a good proxy for monetary policy. Now, it's quite likely that there's going to be a pause come the 14th of June, but I think it's a skip. And the reason I think it's a skip is because the US 2-year yield's trending up. Let's carry on with the labeling of the peaks and troughs. Put in a higher trough, right? Okay, so that's three out of 4. Okay, we need 4 points for a trade. That's 3 out of 4. Here's the 4th point for the trade. Higher peak. Okay, so higher trough followed by higher peak. That's a hawkish trend. Okay, you can see what we could do is we could actually make this a channel. Make it a channel. No, I don't think it fits so well. Okay, well, we'll just keep the trend line in just to measure its momentum, but higher trough, higher peak, and then I'm referring now to the correlation coefficient. Correlation coefficient is a strong 64%. In other words, the US dollar tends to track the 2-year yield. Let's just do some analysis on the 2-year yield on the US dollar now. And we've gone through to MarketScope 2.0. And here we're looking at the weekly chart, and we've got a higher trough. We don't have the 4th point on the US dollar to make it an uptrend. So that's why I've got higher peak question mark. We don't have that just yet. But the idea here is, okay, that we tend to follow the US 2-year yield. So we're going to have to just keep an eye. Do we get the higher peak or do we get the lower peak? Let's just change it. So HP, or is it going to be LP? Okay, they've got very different ramifications for our analysis, very different ramifications. And the ramifications, if it's a lower peak, then we're not trending, then we're consolidating. Let me just make this a different color. Okay, so that's possibility 1. Okay, that's with the lower peak. And then of course, if there is a higher peak here, so if we move, then we can draw in a trend line and we can watch the dollar. How will we tell which way? Well, at the moment, keep an eye on the RSI. See, the RSI now, this is actually a tricky RSI. Why is it a tricky RSI? Because it could be oscillating around 50. If it's oscillating around 50, then I think we get the symmetrical triangle. Okay, then we get the symmetrical triangle. If we stay above 50, then I think we get the uptrend, but it's, you know, we'll only know after the fact. So it's very ambiguous at the moment, and that's a problem for us as traders, because it's much easier to trade a trend than it is to trade a consolidation. If we're consolidating, if we're making a symmetrical triangle here, it's going to be a harder trade for us than if there is a higher peak. Okay, so we ultimately want some sort of trend direction, but I'm not sure we're going to get that. Going back through to the US 2-year yield, well, does suggest trend coming up. Does suggest, but let's not predict. Let's rather react. If there is going to be a trend, okay, if there is going to be a trend, then let's go down to the daily chart and do some analysis on the daily chart and see what we need to take place for the trend to materialize. Okay. So here we've got our zones. Let's just put in our zones. Zone 1, that's our, let's make this a capital Z. Zone 1, that's our bullish area between the upper blue and the upper red. Zone 2 is our neutral area, right? That's between the two blues. And we've got zone 3 here. So if there is going to be a follow through, when I say a follow through, I'm referring to the US 2-year yield. If the US dollar follows through on the US 2-year yield, okay, then we need the daily US dollar chart to move into zone 1. We're on the border. We're right on the border. Okay, so it dropped into zone 2. It does look as if it's making a concerted effort to go into zone 1. Let's keep an eye on this. This over here is very interesting. Can you guys see what's happening with this candle pattern here? So what we've got here is a potential higher trough. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Candlestick 1, candlestick 2, and now this is the one that we've got to keep an eye on, candlestick 3. Is it going to close above candlestick 2's high? Because then we have a reference candle reversal. Okay, then we've potentially got that higher trough. And if we've got that higher trough that kind of locks in, then we're potentially following that US 2-year yield. Take a look at the RSI here. The RSI on the daily was overbought. That's normalized. It's no longer a problem. We can take it out. We're now in normal areas between 50 and 80. So it does look as if the US dollar here is trying to get into zone 1. If it gets into zone 1, then we are potentially moving up, potentially. Okay. It really depends if we can get into zone 1 and hold. Depends if we can hold above 50. And if we can hold above 50 on the RSI, you can see what happens here. Holding above 50 suggests a bullish momentum. So if the dollar is starting to show signs of strength, what's happening to the rest of the market? Okay, let's go through to Euro, US dollar and take a look there. All right. This is a difficult chart to analyze. Why do I think it's a difficult chart to analyze? Because it's in flux, it's in motion. Just like the US dollar, I'm going back to US dollar now just for a moment. Just like the US dollar is in flux. What I mean, it's in flux. There's no trend. There's no trend, and there's no sign of consolidation yet. We're in motion. That's the same thing that's happening with euro, in my opinion. Is that prior to this last leg, we were in uptrend, higher trough, higher peak, higher trough, higher peak. But if the US dollar is starting to move up, then I don't see how the euro US dollar can continue in uptrend. So if we can't continue in uptrend, what's going on here? Are we going to drop below this higher trough? If we drop below this higher trough, it ends the trend. Okay, but it doesn't begin a downtrend, it just ends the uptrend. If we get a lower peak followed by a lower trough, then we've got a downtrend. Okay, what's happening to the momentum here? We've dropped to the bearish side. So we've got a clue. We've got a clue that we have dropped to bearish momentum. And the fact is that, how did we start off the analysis? We started off the analysis with a US 2-year yield and the correlation coefficient. So it looks as if the correlation coefficient is of the US 2 yield supporting US dollar. Well, if it's supporting US dollar, must be some sort of pressure on euro US dollar, but we can't see that yet. It's in flux. If we go down to the daily chart, well, here it started to show some clues. Okay, so let's take a look. We were oversold here. That's cleared. That oversold condition's cleared. Okay, so it's no longer part of the analysis. We take it out. But what's part of the analysis? Is the reference candles. So this area here becomes very, very interesting in terms of the euro. How so? Just like we looked at the reference candles for the dollar, let's do the reference candles for the euro. Candle 1, candle 2, candle 3. Okay, does candle 3's does it close below the low of candle 2? Because if we do, then we get a reference candle reversal, then we get a lower peak here potentially. If we get a lower peak here and we get the RSI staying below 50, well, that's bearish. That's bearish. So at the beginning of the week, it does look as if the US dollar is trying to flex its muscles. And if the US dollar is trying to flex its muscles, it seems to suggest that the euro US dollar is showing some sort of weakness there. Well, if the euro US dollar is showing some sort of weakness there, what's happening with cable? Let's take a look at cable. Last time we looked at cable, actually looked quite bullish. Let's see if that's still the case. Okay, so what's happening with cable is that it is it's fighting a consolidation pattern on the weekly. It's fighting this. What I'd like to do here is actually just shade this in, just to make the consolidation pattern more obvious. So let's just shade this in, and let's do the same for the top. Okay, so you can see we're moving sideways. We're what we call this in technical analysis is a rectangle. It's moving sideways. Now it's fighting the top border of this rectangle, but it's also fighting against US dollar potential strength. Okay, remember, US dollar is potentially going to make a higher peak here. Well, if the US dollar potentially makes a higher peak here, that's going to be a headwind on cable, and that's right by this resistance area. Well, if it's right by this resistance area, what's happening on the daily chart? Okay, take a look at the daily chart here. These candles over here. 1, 2, 3. Okay, it's candle 3 going to close below candle 2's low. Well, that's that reference candle. If it does that, then it potentially goes into zone 3. Well, if potentially goes into zone 3, what's happening to the momentum? Momentum's slipping. Momentum's slipping at the moment. It's looking to cross below 50. So again, it does look as if the greenback is showing some strength here. Okay, what's the problem with the greenback strength is that we're not sure of its absolute power yet, because it's not trending and it's not consolidating. It's in flux. So when it's in flux, very difficult to come out with a succinct analysis. Let's take a look at one more. Let's take a look at DAX. If money's going towards the dollar, is there any pressure on the DAX? Let's take a look. DAX is actually showing resilience. So we've got this support area here. Let's shade this in. So how many weeks do we have here? We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 weeks of the support level holding. Okay. Take a look at the RSR. RSR is above 50. It's just sailing along nicely between 50 and 80. So there does seem to be a primary trend support for DAX. Let's go down to the zone analysis. Okay, so there was a squeeze, then potentially a fake out to the downside, potentially a fake out to the downside. Are we going back into zone 1? Okay, well, we do have the reference candle here. The reference candle is completed here. Okay, what we've got here, it's actually a complex reference candle. It's not a 3 candle pattern, it's a 4 candle pattern. Okay, you've got a 1. I'll just straighten that. You've got 2. This is the reference candle. 2 is the reference candle. 3 is an inside candle, so we're going to ignore that. That's this blue candle here. But then 4 closes above the reference candle's high. So it does look as if DAX has got some bullishness, and potentially that's finding some support off of the non-farm payrolls that came out on Friday. Non-farm payrolls came out, I think it was 339,000 as opposed to 180, round about 185, 186,000. Very strong beat. No signs of recession there. Filtering through to the risk on markets, you can see that the RSI popped above 50. Okay, as it's popped above 50, you've got the reference candle reversal. Now we just want to see it go into zone 1. There's a few things that have to happen here, I think, for the bulls ready to take off. We've got to get the candles into zone 1. Then we've got to get the Bollinger Bands start moving in that northeast direction. If we can get the Bollingers moving in that northeast direction, and we are holding in zone 1, that would be bullish indeed. All right. Are there any questions? Any questions, please go ahead and type those in. Any questions, please go ahead and type those in. Nothing coming through. So what we'll do is we'll conclude at this point. I want to thank you guys for joining me this morning. As always, much appreciated. Have a great day ahead, great evening, and we shall chat tomorrow morning. Thanks very much, guys.